Hello, we are broadcasted from in the basement at an undisclosed location.
There are laws designed to keep order. It is a necessity. There are boundaries and people need their boundaries respected. For instance, I had a conflict recently with someone I know. It escalated and words were exchanged. Words that began with F and ended with off. Words that I said. Surprise. I am a human being and I also have a limit.
What's your point, Hemmans?
Oh yes, my point. This argument set boundaries, and now we understand each other, and so far avoid each other's boundaries. Consider this. Why do people dislike the police? And when I say dislike, I mean just that. Even police don't like the police. And if you're one of those, I support the blue, touche. But I'll ask, and you can lie to me, but don't lie to yourself. How do you feel when an officer pulls you over and walks up to your driver's side window? Do you feel happy? Relieved? I thought so. So I'll ask again. Why do people dislike the police? I'll let your mind wander for a moment. Think about it for the next 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, whatever you thought, that is correct. But I'll add another layer. It is because the police tell you no, you can't do that. You can't do whatever you want. Say whatever you want.
But Hemmans, my freedoms.
Sorry, you can't say anything you want. Yell fire in a theater. How will that work out for you? Insult people that are beloved to others. How did that work out for you? Police are a line in the sand, and no one likes being told no. No, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't. Do what you want. There will be consequences.
Fight me in real life, Hemmans.
Oh yeah, they will.
Where are you going with this?
Point is, there are laws, ordinances, rules. These are our boundaries, and every country has their boundaries as well. And those boundaries are, well, their boundaries, their borders. Borders form the edge of a country, and to cross them would plunge you into those countries. And every country is like a home. For instance, if you cross into Arizona, you would be met by Mark Lamb, a man who calls himself America's sheriff. If you remember Mark, he was the sheriff in Arizona who was looking to expel any illegal migrants. Remember illegals? Build that wall, that enormous red heron distracted from the failures of the receding and declining empire. Mark Lamb was the face of that. Mark Lamb was no lamb. If it was up to him, he would send illegals or perhaps any traveler, any wayfarer passing through his state to an island, a prison island, like Alcatraz, but bigger, more remote. If Mark Lamb was given a genie and granted one wish, what would he wish for? His biggest worry was the illegals, those crafty criminal illegals, breaking the laws of the land he loved. He loved America. The old America, where neighbors knew one another and helped one another. The bygone America, his America.
What do those real Americans look like, Hemmans?
Well, you can use your imagination. Mark Lamb would probably use his wish to send them to Guantanamo Bay. But since he is a Christian, he couldn't do that. That would violate his Christian beliefs. And he is a righteous man, a God-fearing man, and follows the commandments and law. Why do you think he became a sheriff in the first place?
But Hemmans, what about Hebrews 13:2? Do not neglect to show hospitality for strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it.
Quote in the Bible, narrator. I can do that too. What about love thy neighbor? I think Mark forgot those passages. If Mark had one wish, he would probably make all those illegals disappear. Disappear to an island. An island like, well, this island. This island is Christmas Island. Christmas Island began appearing on the charts of English and Dutch navigators from the early 1600s. But it wasn't until 1643 that Captain William Miners of the British East India Company named the island after sighting it on Christmas Day. 200 years later, it was discovered that the island was a rich source of phosphate, a valuable fertilizer. Britain annexed Christmas Island in 1882 to claim its valuable phosphate deposits. The Australian and New Zealand governments purchased the Christmas Island Phosphate Company in 1949, and administrative responsibility for the island shifted from the UK to the British colony of Singapore. But with Britain giving up many of its colonies after the war, Australia expressed an interest in acquiring Christmas Island. Christmas Island became an Australian territory on October 1st, 1958, a day celebrated on the island as Territory Day.
Interesting, KM Hemmans, but what does that have to do with Mark Lamb?
Why the short attention span, narrator?
Why the meandering story, KM Hemmans?
Touché, narrator. Well, the story was just the baseline, so you can understand the background of what is to come.
Well, what is to come?
Patience, narrator. On a potash hill, the Australian government built an immigration and detention center designed for 800 and a further 300 or so if needed in auxiliary facilities. Those seeking asylum in Australia were detained here on Christmas Island, far from the eyes of the common Australian citizen. And much like countless immigration centers around the world, it was designed to break the will of its inhabitants, so that they could tell their countrymen not to come as they did. Not a Salangam Mudagapan, better known as Nades, a Sri Lankan, arrived in Australia by boat in 2012 to seek asylum from persecution in Sri Lanka. Nades claimed he was forced to join the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam in 2001. The Tamil Tigers fought to create an independent state during a bloody civil war, and there, Tamils report they still face retribution, and Nades has said he was harassed by the Sri Lankan military and bear scars from a government bomb blast. Kokil Pathmadapiriya Narasalanglam, also known as Priya, arrived by boat in 2013 to seek asylum. Priya also said she fled Sri Lanka after she saw her then fiancé and 5 other men from her village burned alive by the Sinhalese military. Both Nades and Priya arrived in Australia without a visa and were considered unlawful maritime arrivals. Under Commonwealth law, they were granted temporary bridging visas and settled in the central Queensland town of Bilola, which had welcomed refugees for years. The pair married, and their first daughter, Kopika, was born in May 2015. Their second, Tharanika, was born in June 2017, and on March 4, 2008, Priya's visa expired. At dawn the next day, Nades, Priya, and the 2 girls were removed from their home and placed into the custody of Border Force officials. The family were then flown to the Brownmeadows Detention Center in Melbourne. Tharanika celebrated her first and second birthdays behind wired mesh fences. The removal of the family outraged the Bilowa community, who started the Home to Bilowa campaign to bring them back. In June 2018, the Federal Circuit Court rejected the family's appeal against deportation. Justice Carolyn Curtin found the initial assessment by the Immigration Assessment Authority, which denied refugee status, had been properly conducted. On the night of Thursday, August 29, 2019, the family removed from the Immigration Detention Center to be taken back to Sri Lanka. Supporters arrived at Melbourne Airport to protest the imminent deportation, with some even gaining access to the tarmac of the plane. An injunction to prevent them from being removed from the country was granted. The family were then moved to the immigration center on Christmas Island. Tharanika celebrated her 3rd birthday at the center. Injunctions have prevented the family from being deported while the courts determine whether Tharanika is eligible for refugee protection. There were growing calls for the family to remain in Australia, or at least to be released back into the community in Bilowa, while legal bids continue. There were specific concerns about the 2 girls remaining in detention for so long. In July 2020, Priya was flown to Perth for medical treatment after experiencing several abdominal pain and vomiting for 2 weeks straight. Tharanika had been unwell for 10 days before she was medically evacuated with a suspected blood infection. Earlier that week, family friend Angela Frederick said Tharanika was being treated for pneumonia, which was believed to have been caused by sepsis. Australian Medical Association brand president Andrew Miller cautioned against the child being returned to Christmas Island. I think we should be having a long, hard think about whether, in a psychological and social sense, it is safe to discharge her from hospital back to the environment she came from, Dr. Miller said. Former High Court Chief Justice Sir Gerard Brennan told the Sydney Morning Herald that cruelty was inflicted upon Tharanika to punish her parents. Over the years, the family have attracted supporters from across the political spectrum. In 2019, Prime Minister Morrison categorically ruled out ministerial intervention to stop the family's deportation.
Mr. Morrison and Mark Lamb seem like kindred spirits, KM Hemmans.
Indeed, narrator. Following years in detention, including being isolated on Christmas Island, the family has been living in Perth after Tarnika had been evacuated suffering a severe blood infection. Supporters of the family said they had been surprised by the decision to grant the visa extension to the 3 of the 4 family members while withholding a visa from the youngest child, whose right to claim protection has been the subject of a court challenge. Without a visa, Tarnika is not able to live in the community, as the family had been in Beloa. Instead, as a non-citizen, not holding a visa, she must be in detention, in this case community detention in Perth. Australian law gives Minister Hawke the power to bring the saga to a close with the stroke of a pen by issuing the same visa to a 4-year-old granted to her mom, dad, and his sister. Below resident and family friend Angela Frederick said, just like her sister Kopika, Tarnika was born in Queensland and that is where she belongs. There is simply no reason to deny a child a bridging visa other than to stop her family coming home to Beloa where they are welcome, wanted, and needed by the community. The family's lawyer, Carnea Ford, said it was within the minister's power to allow the family to return home. To make it clear, the minister has chosen not to use his public interest to release the youngest child, to mean the family cannot return to Beloa and will remain in Perth. It used to be that travelers were called wayfarers, and they were to be helped. Look into your scriptures. What does it say about them? Think hard. Whenever you traveled far from home, how did you feel? Very much out of place, very vulnerable. Now think harder. Who made your stay easier? Who gave you directions? How did that help you? To those that traveled, remember how alien you felt, how out of place, how very vulnerable you were. Who made your stay easier? Who gave you directions? Who fed you and clothed you? And who protected you from danger? The good people of the town of Beloa in Australia exemplified this decency. They fought tirelessly for this family, and others in Australia did the same. They are undoubtedly the reason this family was not exiled a long time ago. It was they who blocked the tarmac when their flight for Sri Lanka was to take off. It was they that allowed the injunction that forced the Australian government to make them stay. Mr. Morrison and the Mark Lambs of this world are not the face of a nation. They are the rear end of a nation. Now this family is still in community detention. Will they be allowed to stay? Will Tarnika be allowed to stay in the country she was born? She was born in Australia, the only country she ever knew.
Well, what is to be done, Hemmans?
Well, if it was up to the Mark Lambs of Australia, or the Prime Minister Morrison's, or his Immigration Minister Hawke.
I never knew a hawk and a lamb could have so much in common.
Indeed, narrator. If it was up to them, the answer would be no. No means no. Now, if you ask the people in Beloa, the town that opened their arms to this family, they would say yes.
Why are people like this, Hemmans?
You see, narrator, there is a war going on. A war in our minds.
Who started this war?
I will leave that for you to figure out. A long war.
How long of a war?
A war going back to our first generations. You see, there is an in-group and there is an out-group. People naturally are drawn to this dynamic. People need a place to belong. Now the thing with this dynamic is that in order for this in-group to work, there must be an out-group. Someone must be out.
Someone like Tarnika?
Well done, narrator. You are astute and a quick wit. You see, Tarnika represents something, and that something is the other. She is not a person, but an idea. You see, she is different in a fundamental way. She is from a different society, a different culture. And while there is another difference.
What is the difference, Hemmans?
I don't want to say.
Hemmans at a loss for words?
No, not at all. I will tell you with an example. Once upon a time there was a nation at war, and families fled to save their lives. After a vicious civil war and a witch hunt, one family escaped, but instead of being attacked, locked up, like the Mark Lamb and Morrisons would prefer, they were exempted from this treatment. Wait, did
Prime Minister Morrison or Mark Lamb suddenly grow a heart?
No, narrator. Their hearts didn't expand to 3 times their size. They are not the Grinch.
So why did this happen?
You see, they weren't Mexicans or Sri Lankans. They were Ukrainians.
Oh, I see, Hemmans.
This is our nature. But remember this, even Mexico has their own form of Mark Lamb, and so does Sri Lanka. And Australia has wonderful people, as does America, like those residents who fight in the fight to keep Tarnika home in Australia. And I choose to think that they are the majority, as are you.